Apple prides itself on its
courage. The courage
to do what no one else does.
The courage of our convictions to
solder everything down.
Courage.
To remove features, pushing your willingness to pay more for less. But sometimes they falter. Sometimes innovation rears its ugly head. And today we have the iMac Pro. The upgradable iMac. The workstation iMac. The Mac for legitimate creative professionals. Who saw that one coming? Today's video is brought to you by us. Check out the LTT merch store at the link in the video description. We've got shirts, mugs, hats, stickers, and more. So the base 8-core configuration of the iMac Pro is $4,999 US. Let's take you for a tour then and break down what you get for that money and how that would compare to buying components off the shelf. The most obvious feature of any AIO is the LCD. Spec-wise, there's really not much out there like it, with LG's ultrafine 5K being the closest analog, with P3 wide gamut color support, 500 nit maximum brightness, Thunderbolt 3 input, and a $1,700 price tag. Moving under the hood, the next most expensive component is an 8-core Intel Xeon W2140B, a slightly downclocked version of the Xeon W2145 that can be swapped out for up to a Xeon W2195 18-core for very heavy workloads. Now with a Xeon comes ECC or error correcting memory, and even our base model has a healthy 32 gigs of it. Interestingly, unlike previous 5K iMacs, the Pro is using full-size DIMMs rather than SO-DIMMs. Theoretically great news for upgraders. But alas, Apple giveth, and Apple taketh away. To take full advantage of the Xeon's quad-channel memory controller, all 4 of the iMac Pro's slots are populated, and there is no access hatch on the back. A little bit more on that later. One of the most underwhelming aspects of the base iMac Pro is probably the GPU, a Vega 56. I mean, it's not terrible, but considering that previous Mac Pros used Fire Pros rather than consumer cards, and the price point, you might reasonably expect better. And the same could be said for the upgrade options. Your GPU is soldered directly to the motherboard, so the only way to max it out with the marginally faster Vega 64 is to pay upfront AMD's full MSRP for a standalone card on top of what you already paid theoretically for a Vega 56. Thanks, cryptocurrency miners. So bottom line, with a comparable motherboard, equivalent 10 gigabit networking, a terabyte of very fast PCI Express storage, a power supply, a case, cooling, and some decent peripherals, the Apple tax on this particular model, even ignoring that computers do not assemble themselves and that ongoing software support and warranty coverage both have a value, is a whopping -$200. So why is it that Apple has this reputation for having overpriced computers? We're gonna get to that. First, let's talk about the experience of using the iMac Pro. It is essentially identical to that of a regular iMac. The display is gorgeously retina and very bright, but with fat bezels and no HDR support for reasons that likely have everything to do with supply chain and nothing to do with courage. It declutters your life with only a single cable needed for power, as long as you don't need to plug anything into one of the conveniently located USB 3 or Thunderbolt 3 ports at the back, and the included wireless peripherals are more than usable, ranging from pretty darn good for a low-profile chiclet style, at least it has a numpad, to the built-in touchpad is really cool for gestures, but how have they not fixed this charging port yet? Really similar, except for one big difference. The iMac Pro uses workstation class and modern hardware, something you can't take for granted. So you'd probably think then that tools like Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro that have been tuned for years for outdated, mainstream, or mobile CPUs would run like Billio on this thing. And you'd be right. This is the fastest Mac ever built in every respect. You kind of have to feel it to believe how quick and responsive it is across the board. Safari launches instantly. Even at 5K, desktop animations never drop a frame, and even Adobe Premiere, as much of a dog as it can be, launches every bit as quickly as the fastest test benches we've ever built. Oh, and also, 10 gigabit Ethernet means that the iMac Pro is a real Mac that is finally able to work with large files and networked resources right out of the box. Something that is essential to our production workflow, where we keep all of our footage on a redundant, protected, high-speed storage device on the network. As for how well it performs elsewhere, well, it should come as no surprise that it tears through most of our professional tests with relative ease. CINEBENCH scores landed about where they should, Luxmark spat out some very respectable numbers, and Blender ran very well. Except when it didn't. We're kind of hoping that the performance issues with Blender's Cycles renderer are just growing pains that will be dealt with in short order. With all of those rosy results in mind though, it should be noted that the Xeon W didn't quite match the performance of our similar Xeon W or our similarly priced desktop-grade Core i9, and that even our base model CPU throttled under sustained loads, with the iMac Pro's cooling system staying inaudibly quiet rather than holding the CPU temperatures at a more comfortable 70 to 80 degrees. We'd like to see Apple ramp up the fan more aggressively. Though with that said, given the placement of the exhaust, with air basically being blown back into the intake anyway, it's kind of hard to tell how much it would help. And what we also don't know at this time is how a higher spec CPU would affect any of this. Let's get back to that discussion about upgradability. Now, Apple may officially void your warranty, and getting inside the iMac Pro is a real chore. But it appears as though the CPU, RAM, and proprietary SSDs, there are 2 of them running in RAID 0, could all be swapped out for compatible replacements. So this is something that we plan to explore in a follow-up video. Bottom line then, it feels like Apple is finally listening to its professional users. There are a few things missing. Maybe kind of like the Soviets after the 1969 moon landing, they've decided to just let Microsoft have it as the only one with a sexy AIO with a digitizer by leaving out support for the Apple Pencil. But they gave us 10 gig Ethernet and truly professional grade performance. And they did it in a form factor with a level of polish that nobody does quite like Apple. So, thermals aside, I guess it's pretty magical. And our major gripes with it are really just the usual stuff about the restrictiveness of the Apple ecosystem in general. 1. Without any obvious reason, the iMac Pro doesn't support target display mode, which would allow you to get more mileage out of it as a monitor once the internals become outdated. 2. Other than Thunderbolt 3, there is no way to add an expansion card in spite of the CPU's massive 48 PCIe lanes. And 3, while on paper, the specs and pricing actually look really attractive compared to an apples to apples DIY solution, a big part of the reason for that is Apple's manner of choosing expensive options that not everyone would necessarily spring for if given the choice. Better performance per dollar can be achieved with some compromises in a DIY box. Now, it's possible that when the true standalone workstations arrive, perhaps later in 2018, that we'll see some more flexibility here. NVIDIA GPUs, anyone? They've got drivers! But I wouldn't hold my breath. Speaking of breath, do you find yourself as a small business owner or freelancer having a hard time catching your breath at the end of the day? Especially when you go, oh, now I have to sit down and do accounting? Well, FreshBooks is the solution for you. It's the simple way to be more productive, more organized, and get paid faster. You can create and send professional-looking invoices in less than 30 seconds. You can set up online payments with just a couple of clicks and get paid up to 4 days faster. You can see when your client has seen your invoice, putting an end to the guessing games, and you can take all kinds of great functionality like their time tracker and their expense tracker with you on the go on your Android or iOS smartphone. So for your unrestricted 30-day free trial, go to freshbooks.com/techtips. We'll have that linked below, and enter Linus Tech Tips in the How Did You Hear About Us section. So thanks for watching, guys. If this video sucked, you know what to do, but if it's awesome, get subscribed, hit that like button, or check out the link to where to buy the stuff we featured in the video description. Also linked down there is our merch store, which has cool shirts like this one, and our community forum, which you should totally join.